The Mormon missionaries just told Chris that their first prophet, Joseph Smith, went into the woods as a 14-year-old boy and that God and Jesus Christ both appeared to him. Let's see what Chris has to say about this.
Do you guys believe that this was a real physical event? That this is an historical fact?
That's what Joseph said. They really appeared to him.
Was anyone else there to witness it?
No, he was by himself.
So all we have to go on are his own words.
That's right.
Sounds fishy to me.
But I'm sure he told other people about it right away. His family, at least.
I'm sure they knew all about it.
Actually, that's not exactly true. You see, I've done a lot of studying about this. The first time there was any recorded mention of the first vision was in 1832. It was in one of Smith's journal entries, 12 years after it supposedly happened. Why do you think it took so long for him to write it down?
I don't know the answer to that, but...
In 1833, the Mormon Church published the first Book of Commandments. That was a book that had all of Smith's revelations to that point. And nowhere in that book is there any reference to the first vision. And when Smith wrote the church history in 1835, there was still no mention of it. Why?
I don't know.
The first newspapers published by the Mormon Church were in 1834 until 1836. There's no mention of a first vision. In 1835, Smith's lectures on faith taught that the Godhead is two separate personages. But again, no mention of a first vision. Then, in 1837, the first important missionary pamphlet of the church was written by Mormon apostle Parley P. Pratt. You'd think surely the first vision would be mentioned then, right?
But it wasn't?
No, not a word about it. The first time the story was published was in the church newspaper in 1842.
What? That's 22 years after it supposedly happened.
That's the first time the public heard of it. So until then, the missionaries had never even heard of their prophet's claim to seeing God and Jesus.
I'm not sure that's true. We'll have to check it out.
It is, trust me. I've done my research. The official account of the first vision wasn't included in Mormon scripture until 1889, 22 years after Smith's death. It wasn't until the early 1900s that the vision was printed in the missionary literature. Can you imagine all those early Mormons never even hearing about the first vision until years after it supposedly happened?
Well, we teach it now, and that's the important thing. That's right. In fact, one of our prophets, Gordon B. Hinckley, said, I've got the quote right here, quote, "Our whole strength rests on the validity of that vision. It either occurred or it did not occur. If it did not, then that work is a fraud."
I'm glad you brought that up. I want us to take a closer look at Smith's different versions of the first vision to see just how valid they are.
Different versions?